with the Break-a-Leggers,
and we are bringing you our very first theatre podcast, where we're going to be talking about the National Theatre, specifically the Olivier space.
Also, the recently opened, everybody's talking about Jamie. Did the critics like it or loathe it?
Theatre openings and closing in London's West End.
And lots more exciting theatre news.
So listen in to keep your finger on the
Theatrical pulse. Thought that we could expand a bit more on our thoughts and feelings on the latest goings on in the theatre world by recording a bit of a conversation with you. So hopefully you'll enjoy, and hopefully you'll get in touch to let us know what you think, whether you've learned anything from us and whether you think this is a good idea and something you'd like to hear more of.
Yes, so please do get in touch with us. We'd love to hear what you think. If there's anything you want us to be talking about, hey, let us know.
Yeah, we're all over the place. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're even on Instagram, so you've no excuse not to drop us a line.
So some key things for us to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been some interesting news recently through the National Theatre, which we are a huge fan of that space. There are, as you may know, many different theatres within the National itself, 3 to be exact, main spaces, and they are the Littleton, the Dorfman, and the one that we're going to be talking about today is the largest space they have, the Olivier space.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the National Theatre, they do tours, which we've been on, of the National Theatre. I'd recommend it. How much roughly was it to get on that tour?
I think it was £10 to £15, lasts an hour or so. You get to see behind the scenes.
Yeah, backstage.
Yeah, you get to ask questions to people that work at the National. Depending on when you go, if they're not using the rehearsal spaces as well, that's a really interesting thing to see. You might even get this chance to go on a stage at the National too.
And I think the key thing about that, as you said, is that each theatre within the National Theatre is so unique and has so many different things to offer in terms of its space. How would you describe the Dorfman to start with?
The Dorfman's totally flexible. I mean, it's probably better suited to shows that could be performed in the round. It's quite an intimate space. The seats are facing one another in large areas for that kind of in the round experience. But they do also have a cross arch.
It's kind of area. So flexible and dynamic. I don't think I've seen any 2 shows really the same in that space.
No, it's the closest thing they have there to a studio theatre.
Yes.
It's very much like the Donmar, for example.
Yes,
or
but
even the
all
Park.
Sides almost.
Yes.
Donmar and the Park's very intimate, I think, is the thing about the Dorfman. The next one is the Littleton space, which is more your kind of contemporary proscenium arch space. There's the stalls, and then above the stalls there's a dress circle.
There's just one circle.
Circle. So there's a circle on the stalls, and that's, I mean, there's not much you can do than that. That is kind of what you would imagine as a normal theatre.
Yes. What is known as kind of a bit of a beast within the theatre world is definitely the Olivier space. Now, if you've been in there, you will know what a cavernous kind of, almost amphitheatre-esque
I think that's how they
that is.
Yeah, that's how they frame it. I think it was designed on the original kind of Greek amphitheatre style, so it almost comes out the front, almost thrusts out, and then it spans almost, how many degrees would you say? 140 degrees?
Yeah, probably
almost
across
from side to
2
side.
levels.
So it is pretty vast, and from an audience member, when you go in, it is a beautiful,
breathtaking
space. However,
yes, they have not had much in the way of hits within that space recently, and I think that is in large due to maybe the directors just not understanding the opportunities that space provides, but also the limitations of that space and how you can get across a small idea into a large-scale production and hit every audience member. There has been a really interesting column on the What's on Stage website by Sarah Crompton called "Why Today's Theatre Makers Aren't Suited to the Olivier."
Which is quite a statement, really. And I know it's only one person's opinion, but why today's theatre makers aren't suited to the Olivier, I don't know if I agree with that. I think, personally, It's very much to do with the piece.
Well, what are her main points? What is she saying? Why doesn't she believe they are?
Well, she's basically saying that it's an enormous demand on the writer, that the space almost dictates what should be put on, which I agree. I think it's an epic space. It doesn't suit naturalistic performances, which she kind of says, and that it's being asked for the directors and the writers to bring on big epic pieces. But isn't that common sense?
It is. You would think so. If your piece of writing was being considered for that space, the piece of writing has already been submitted. If that lands in front of you as a director, you know you have your work cut out in order to bring that production to that largest of spaces and to make it fill the room. If you cannot do that, then that piece isn't, it might be the best piece of writing that's ever landed in your lap. But if it's not a piece of writing that warrants the ideas that you need to employ in the Olivier space, then leave it alone. I think that is what I would take from that.
I mean, Sarah Compton says it, that Lucy Kirkwood's Mosquitoes, which we saw in the Dorfman, which was great, that she said specifically she didn't want it to go into the Olivier because it was too big a space for the intimate piece that she wanted, which I think is absolutely right. But I think even within that, you can make a piece fit the space.
I think to a certain degree, yes, you are right, but then when does it become frivolous? When are you throwing ideas at a piece of text just to fill a room, rather than actually keeping it true to the spirit of the text? There is a fine balance. Now, as we're recording this, there are 2 shows in rep at the Olivier, in the Olivier at the National at the moment, and they are St. George and the Dragon and Follies. One of which is a massive hit. We need not discuss here. We've reviewed the piece and given our thoughts on Follies, so do check that out over on YouTube. We've not seen St. George and the Dragon, but let's say it has been not well received by critics and audience members alike.
Which what takes me to the thing, isn't it about the piece? If the piece isn't good or produced well, it's got nothing to do with the space. It's the piece. If Follies is going to do well, it's because it's been produced well, it's got great music, great cast, great lights, etc. Something like, let's think of what we've seen that hasn't been too great, Common, I think has universally been panned pretty much as one of its failures. Just didn't hold, wasn't a great piece. It doesn't matter where you put it. If you put it into a different space, if you put it into a proscenium arch theatre, the piece isn't good. It has nothing to do with the actual space.
But then who's making those decisions in the latest season at the National? 4 pieces going into the Olivier that shouldn't be in there. Salome's another example of that. It went into the Olivier space and people hated the piece, thought it was awful. No amount of production can save a poor script.
The other one was it Wonder.Land was the other musical, which was in the Olivier, which was just bad. Yeah. Again, it's got nothing to do with the space. The piece is just bad.
Yes. I think what we're saying here is Sarah Crompton, there are certain things within what you're saying that do make some sense, but it's not the Olivier Theatre's fault. It is the fault of the person that is passing those scripts into the hand of a director and saying this piece needs to go on in the Olivier, because sometimes it just doesn't. It doesn't need to go on in that space, and in some cases it doesn't need to go on a stage at all.
So it's basically about the piece.
Yes.
Because I think we should say that there have been some fantastic stuff. We saw Amadeus.
Yes, which worked phenomenally in that piece, filled out by orchestra. I think that's made the difference. The music within Amadeus and having a large-scale orchestra on stage with the actors at all times, that fleshed out the production. Would I have enjoyed Amadeus less in a Pros Arch? I don't know. I don't think I would. I think the piece is good.
The piece is good, and that's what matters, right? Follies, good piece. 12th Night with Tamsin Gregg.
Yeah.
That was heralded. They did National Live broadcast of that. It was a great dynamic production. Can't go wrong with that. I mean, she does say so in the piece article as well about it not suiting intimate pieces, that more the big epic scale things work. And I'd say that does make sense. And I think it's just a delicate balance. This is where National Theatre is so versatile, is that it can cater to intimate pieces in intimate venues, and it can go right across to the big epics in the Olivier space. Going back a few years, Frankenstein was a big one as well.
Mm-hmm. What have you guys seen in the Olivier space, and how did it work for you as a theatre? Did you feel detached due to the vastness of the area? Interesting thing, actually, we've been lucky enough to be on the stage in the Olivier, and when you're on the stage looking out into the audience, it feels a lot more intimate than when you are in the audience looking down to the stage. Bizarre. It's almost an anti-TARDIS effect.
It's true. It is. Everything seems very close, and yet when you're out at the back of the circle, it feels huge. So
absolutely does. I think there's another conversation to be had here about pieces, if you can name anyone out there, that have transferred from the Olivier maybe into a West End house where they don't have that setup. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
I can think of two of the... Oklahoma was a big musical.
Okay, and that went into which theatre, do you know?
That went into the... Whereabouts is Lion King at the moment?
The Lyceum.
Lyric.
The Lyceum.
Is it Lyceum? So that transferred over there with Wolverine Man, Hugh Jackman.
Yes, and an interesting one actually is a piece. This is probably a rarity. We'll touch on him. We'll mention him a bit later on as well. But one of our favourite playwrights, James Graham, had a piece go from the Dorfman, which at that time was called the Cottesloe. It's had a name change recently, into the Olivier. Did it, or did it go to the Littleton?
Which one are you thinking of?
At this house.
This house, no, it started off in the Olivier, didn't it?
No, I don't think it did.
Oh, we caught it at the Olivier.
No, we didn't. Did we?
Yeah, we saw. The first time we saw it was performed, and the. Oh, now you're getting me thinking.
I think it was the Littleton.
Maybe it was the Littleton.
So it skipped the Olivier entirely. But so yeah, this is a moot point.
However, we have got another one. Warhorse is what I'm thinking of. Was staged at the Olivier, and then that transferred to the New London Theatre.
Was Warhorse not on at the?
No.
In the Littleton?
No.
Okay. Well,
with much stuff going on in the National Theatre.
With Warhorse, it did go to the New London, but the New London is a flexible space anyway. I would say
it's quite similar, isn't it?
It's actually probably the closest to the Olivier.
In build and its functionality and its...
So that wasn't a step out, I don't think.
But it was a step out in that it was at the Olivier and then it went to New London.
That is absolutely true.
Are there any others?
Let us know. We'd love to hear
Let us know.
From
this
you.
House, where did it start? Clarify some points for us.
Please do. We have recently been lucky enough to review the musical There's Something About Jamie. And I have, on behalf of the Leggers, started a bit of a discussion over on a fantastic website called theatreboard.co.uk.
Okay.
Theatreboard.co.uk is an online forum where you can talk to theatre fanatics about everything from plays, musicals, operas, regional and West End, and even international.
Now, I've got to say there's no people more opinionated than those involved in arts. Art in general, whether it's music, whether it's theatre, whether it's musicals, everyone's got an opinion and a strong one at that.
They do. Now, we saw Everybody's Talking About Jamie, and we gave it 3 legs. Now, for us, 3 legs it's perfectly adequate for a musical. It means, I had a good evening, wasn't a waste of my time. Nothing wrong with the 3-star review. 3 legs, as we are the Leggers. The critics have absolutely praised it to high heaven. It has got nothing less than 4 and 5 stars throughout the professional critic world. So think of like The Guardian, What's on Stage, that ilk of reviewer. Now, what I started a bit of a discussion on was the What's on Stage review in particular, which was written by Daisy Bowie Sell, said in her review that it's not a perfect musical, said that the first act takes a long time to get where it's going, that she found some of the productions and some of the things happening on stage a bit clunky, and basically did critique it within her review, yet still gave a 5-star rating.
Okay, what's your point, caller?
My point is, how can you criticise a point on a musical or a play or any piece of art and then rate it the top that you can rate it? What is the metric here?
Okay, so I guess the first thing to establish is, what is your metric? What would you say a 5-star review would be? What is perfection?
I would say a 5-star review is that there is little to nothing that can be improved.
Okay. I think, you see, this is a bit of a tricky one because I think you need to put a bit more, or we need to put a bit more context to everybody's talking about Jamie, because we're saying, firstly, it's a British story.
It is a
based
British
on
musical.
an original British BBC film, documentary.
BBC Three documentary.
Jamie, drag queen at 16, wasn't it? So it started here in the UK. So it's an original idea in the UK. So that's something that's kind of everybody keeps pulling out. The themes within itself, it's got a very sentimental story. It's got very good heart, talking about LGBT, standing up for yourselves, inclusivity, the complete, within the cast, the complete diverse array of people on stage, facing up to adversity. So all the themes and all the elements are there and right in order to make this beautiful cacophony of something special. However, when we saw it, it kind of fell a bit flat for us. And that is something, I think I'm picking that up from other people. Am I saying that?
I would say more often than not, no. People seem to be rushing over the glaring staging and directorial problems that the piece has and had when we saw it in its staging and production, which, by all accounts, we saw it in previews, granted, but I've heard that those things things remain. They have not been fixed. The argument here is, if a major publication was to give anything less than a 4 or 5 star rating to a brand new British piece of theatre that is about LGBTI plus issues, could they be considered to be, at best, non-supportive of British musicals, or at worst, homophobic, transphobic, or phobic of differences? And is that steering how many stars publications are giving to a piece that deals with those sorts of issues?
Now, that's always quite controversial.
And
I'd say that's a broad stroke.
I'm asking the question.
It's worth asking the question, and who knows? And I think that the point, surely at the end of the day, it comes down to how good the piece is, and people can't get, or I'd like to think that people can't get roped into those kind of, let those issues sway their judgment on how they rate it. Mm-hmm. I like to think that, what I try to do is, when we comment on theatre, is try to give an impartial decision as if I've walked in on that day and I'm just judging it on from the moment the lights go down to the moment the light comes up at the end, how I felt, whether I was engaged, whether it landed, how it was produced on stage, whether everything worked, the calibre of the actors. Surely that is it. And it would be a shame to think that those other things were influencing someone's decision on how many how many stars it received. After all, art is a subjective art form, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. What we have learned is that people do get very passionate when you have a difference of opinion.
Very passionate
about any piece of art, but particularly musicals. It does seem that a lot of where we've not maybe agreed with the masses on some of our opinions on musicals, we've been called out on that and taken to task about it. It's such a difficult subject matter here, because I can see that these major publications would not want to be accused of being unsupportive of British talent, and also would not want to be accused of being against the types of topics that Jamie is exploring. And and are they going to put their neck on the line?
See, there's a couple of things here, right? Firstly, I think, going back to art is subjective. I think the piece, the play art, beautifully illustrates that. Who's that written by? Is it
Yasmin Reza?
Yasmin Reza. If anybody gets a chance to see that, it's fantastic.
It's touring soon, actually, so maybe coming to a town near you. Google it.
I recommend you go and see it. In terms of this subjectivity, in terms of how different people see the same thing but can get completely different outcomes, it's just a really good idea to explore. And I agree, musical theatre, I don't know why it is that musical theatre people, sorry for kind of stereotyping, but from our experience, it seems that it's people who love musical theatre have very strong views, and you're almost seen as the enemy if you kind of put in a different opinion. It's almost like a pack of wolves jumping on us. Mm-hmm. However, also in terms of supporting British theatre, I think British theatre is up there with the best in the world. If you think of how much stuff is going over to Broadway, Angels in America, People, Places and Things, Wolf Hall.
I've got to mention here, these are all plays.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm talking about, even if they're plays, in terms of British theatre, it's still British theatre. So it's stuff that's happening over here in the UK that is, if it's good, it's kind of where I'm coming to. If something is good, it will go. It will go.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think? Have you seen everybody's talking about Jamie? How did it leave you feeling? Are you on board with these 5-star reviews? But do you think that the piece still has room for growth and improvement? And therefore, does it need to be rated under a different metric system? Let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, let us know.
A couple of openings within the next couple of weeks of note within the West End and around London. Firstly, on the 1st of December, we have a brand new production of the classic story Pinocchio opening at the National Theatre in the Littleton Space.
Is it the Littleton Space it's going into?
It is indeed.
Oh, now... you were talking about this earlier, and then it's a bit confusing because it's got Disney songs. Is that right?
Correct. I am very confused. It's not a Disney production, but it is using all of the well-known songs from the Disney animated 1950s musical film, such as When You Wish Upon a Star, I've Got No Strings, Give a Little Whistle, all of those classic songs. But they're in new arrangements and they are in a brand new production.
So it's a bit strange to have that Disney, obviously you've given license to it, but it's not under the Disney banner.
Correct. Which doesn't, if you're going to adapt Pinocchio, why not start from scratch? Why use those songs? What are they trying to achieve? Is it to get an audience in?
Well, didn't they have the same for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? When Charlie and the Chocolate Factory went over to Broadway, they then shoehorned in some of the songs from the film.
Yes.
Is it make it more accessible to an audience, or maybe to attract an audience in? If you're on a safe bet, you're given the songs that are unforgettable.
Yes, they. When it was over here, we only had
Imagination.
Pure Imagination.
Pure Imagination.
And then when it went to Broadway, they put the Oompa Loompa songs back into it. They put I've Got a Golden Ticket, Candyman, and Pure Imagination again, in order to make it more accessible. Now, I think that was less of a decision based on the songs are known and it's going to draw an audience in, to actually there is a lot of songs within the original production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that opened here, written by the Shamans. Was it the Shamans?
Pass.
Not Shaman. That were bad.
Yeah, the production was great, but the numbers didn't really... A lot of the text was lost and it was a bit too clever.
We thought that some of the songs were just poor, and I think it was probably a good decision that they swapped them out for the better written songs that were from the movie. No point here though, it still hasn't saved the show, and the Broadway version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is closing in January, after a pretty short run in comparison to what it had here at Drury Lane.
Yeah. So going back to Pinocchio and the musical numbers, it's actually being it's the musical supervisor.
Yes, and orchestration.
And orchestrations are being done by Martin Lowe, who I've had the pleasure of working with in the past, and he is absolutely fantastic. So I will be expecting good things from this as an expectation. He did recently Our Ladies of Perpetual Succor.
Yes.
Is he working on Mamma Mia?
The second Mamma Mia, I'm not sure, but he did do the orchestrations for the Mamma Mia movie.
And the original stage production as well.
Yes, so as you may know, the Mamma Mia movie is getting a sequel. Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. Jury's out on that one.
Interesting to see how that one goes down.
Yes.
What else is going on with
director
this?
is of note of Pinocchio, actually, as well, is John Tiffany, who directed and won Olivier Award last year for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Ooh.
And you can catch our review of his production of The Glass Menagerie.
Yes, now that was on Broadway and then it transferred over here as well for a little stint.
It did.
So he's doing very well for himself.
He's doing very well. Another opening, which is probably going to wipe the floor, and if I was a new musical in the West End at the moment, I would be very nervous indeed. And that is from December 6th, Hamilton.
Yeah, long anticipated. The theatre, which theatre is it going into?
It's going into the completely renovated Victoria Palace Theatre. Out near Victoria Station, near Wicked, where Wicked is.
It's been under a year-long refurbishment almost, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe even a little bit longer now. It was originally due to start previews on November 21st, and unfortunately the theatre, for its renovation, just wasn't ready at all. So they've pushed that back by 16 performances, which they've had to reschedule and move the audience, and now it starts on December 6th.
And as usual, musical theatre fans, there's been some pretty savage comments made about how could they, it's disastrous, world coming to an end, which I imagine it would be pretty bad if you...
Yeah, if you planned an entire trip around something, you come into London, you may be travelling a long distance, and then the show that you are going to see, you'd planned your whole trip around, is suddenly no longer there. I can imagine that's make you pretty angry.
But I imagine Cameron wouldn't have made those decisions lightly.
No.
This is like his big import, big renovation.
Massive investment.
I imagine he's hoping this will run and run and run.
We talk about some closings as well shortly. Closing is something we caught and enjoyed very much. You can check out our review for it. And that's James Graham's play Labour of Love.
Yes, starring Tamsin Gregg and also Martin Freeman.
Yes, which just was a brilliant, brilliant night out. So well observed. Classic James Graham.
Yeah, big fans of his.
Really big fans. Also closing is the aforementioned St George and the Dragon at the Olivier. Judging by how that's been received, I'm probably glad to get that off the stage.
Yeah, it hasn't been received well.
No. And also Toxic Avenger, which we unfortunately didn't get a chance to see at the Arts Theatre. That was a transfer out from the Southwark Playhouse, directed by Benji Sperring, and by all accounts is brilliant.
Yeah, a bit gutted we didn't get to see that. If you got to see it, please let us know what you thought of that.
Yes, absolutely. Please do. Hold the press.
Hold the press.
Couple of new announcements this week. Some really interesting and exciting new shows coming up for 2018.
Okay.
Both by Michael Grandage, who, if you may know, is a great director, producer, does some wonderful work in London and beyond.
Yeah.
He has a revival of the play Red coming up. I don't know if you know the play Red at all.
I don't. I have heard about this. I heard something about the cast for Red.
Yeah.
There's some casting.
So in Red premiered, probably 10 years ago now, at the Donmar Warehouse. And in the cast was Alfred Molina, and also before he became the kind of Hollywood superstar that he is, also Eddie Redmayne was in the cast for Red.
Okay.
It's the story of Mark Rothko, who's a famous artist, and him getting recognised. I don't know much more outside of that. Didn't see the original production. Don't know much more about it. But it's been revived, and Alfred Molina is stepping into the role that he had at the Donmar Warehouse. And he's also being joined by some other actors. Alfred Molina is being joined by Alfred Enoch, who is playing the role that Eddie Redmayne performed when the piece premiered in 2009. He's also got another play, which is another revival, and that's The Lieutenant of Inishmore. And that is starring none other than Poldark himself, Aidan Turner.
Wow. That's a bit of a... that'll have some heartthrobs in the audience, because people love him.
Heartthrobs in the audience, heartthrobs on stage.
Heartthrobs on stage. There'll be people wanting to see him, for sure.
Yes, I'd imagine there'll be some damp seats. The thing to note here about the Lieutenant of Inishmore is it's a Martin McDonough. Big thing to note here is that the Lieutenant of Inishmore is a Martin McDonough play, and we saw Hangmen a couple of years ago now, which is also Martin McDonough, which was fantastic. He has done The Cripple of Inishmaan, he has done The Beauty Queen of Lenan, He has also another play opening, A Very, Very, Very Dark Matter at the Bridge Theatre next year, and also a film. He did the screenplay for In Bruges, and he also has a film coming called Six. What's it called?
Isn't it something about
6 billboards in
Yes.
on a road outside
of somewhere in America?
Somewhere in America. So
It
the
looked very
trailer,
interesting,
it
yeah.
looked really, really interesting. So I think they're going to be hot tickets, guys. The tickets are on sale now. If you're interested in either of those plays, grab a seat whilst you can. So there's just a little time with us to expand a bit more on theatre goings on, openings, closing, and, you know, everything from Theatreland. What do you think? How can we improve on this? This is the first one. It's a bit of a pilot. We'd love to hear from you, so get in touch.
Yeah, we look forward to listening to you, and hopefully we'll get another one of these out in a month's time for the time being. So we'll have some stuff to talk about, and maybe even some other guests to get some other points of view.
We're the Breaker Leggers, and we'll catch you again soon.
Bye.